Hey guys, Magic here, and it's time to show off my new deck. Unfortunately, it's not the modern one. Beam me down. Oh, Scotty's gonna be mad that one's not done yet. It actually was done, but it completely sucks in testing, so oops. In the meantime, we've got a standard deck, and this is a resurrection of my old Crypto Bomb / Superland Junior deck, closer to Superland Junior. I figured, hey, I saw some of the big colorless creatures. I'm like, we got to do it. We got to revive that old framework. Except half the cards are legal, so this one kind of sucks. But it still works. In testing, it really does work. Now, what to name it was the thing. I was gonna call it by its actual code name, which everything has a working code name. It was Green Superheroes, but that's just stupid. I was gonna call it Alternative because it's like the alternative without Eldrazi, and then I realized that it has a bunch of Eldrazi in it. Oops. I think I was gonna call it like Green Fatties, but then none of the large creatures are actually green. Then I was gonna call it the deck that cannot be named, as a parody of kind of like Harry Potter, the one who shall not be named, you know. Then I just said screw it and named it the Fat Pack. Because why not? Why did I name it that? Because screw you, wizards. Big giant creatures are usually called fatties, and this has a ton of them, so it's the Fat Pack. Alright, let's jump right into it. I might as well start with the mana base, because I never do that. It's 15 forests and 4 evolving wilds, and then 4 blighted woodlands. Nothing special there. The green special land was crap. It's just a bad card. It's not like it's bad for this deck. It's just bad in general. It wastes your next draw. It's stupid. It's a waste of time, and it'll kill you. There are maybe better lands to throw in here. I didn't look at all of them. I'm really lazy. Blighted can go get 2 more forests. It single-handedly makes it so that you can dump all of the land out of your deck and onto the battlefield. Now, as far as land dump, we've got Oath of Nissa. Now, that's a pretty cool card because when it enters the battlefield, it's kind of like a spell. It's an enchantment, but who gives a crap? You look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature, a land, or a planeswalker from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom. And then some irrelevant effect that is irrelevant. So it's kind of cool because if you're good on land or if you don't hit a land, you can just go get a creature. And you could use a land or a creature late game. Either one would be fine. So that's absolutely brilliant for costing 1. Next, we've got Attune with the Aether. I'm not a fan of this card. It wasn't my first choice, but Nissa's Pilgrimage is illegal now. So, and Explosive Vegetation, which would have been vastly superior. This doesn't put a land onto the battlefield, but, you know, you search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. You're going to run out of land drops pretty quick, so it's almost as effective. The majority of the time, you can just drop it directly onto the battlefield, or just wait a couple turns when you would have been out of land and then drop it. So, slows down the deck a bit. You do get 2 energy counters, completely relevant with this deck unless you want to tweak it a little bit. It's always a shame to use half of a card. I mean, that's just never a good sign, but the best land fetch is gone, nothing I can do. So there's your land fetch, that and, you know, Blighted Woodland, obviously. Then, as far as staying alive, we've got Jaddi Offshoot, which is a 0/3 defender with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, and then retreat to Kazandu. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a 1/1 counter on target creature, or you can gain 2 life. Between the two, you end up making such a big creature or 2 creatures that they can't swing against you and you're good forever, or you just go up to like 50 life, and I am not kidding, you will be at like 50 life. You get multiples out, that's it. When you start draining cards out of your deck by going to fetch the lands and then dropping them in, it gets really, really likely that you're going to draw more than 1. The only problem is, as with Superland Junior, you pretty much have to start the game with a Jaddi or a retreat. If you start the game with both, it's almost impossible to lose. Next up, if you thought I wasn't going to stop in Innistrad, wrong. We've got an Eldritch Moon card, a very overlooked card. This is quite a good card, actually. It's like Elvish Mystic on steroids. I'm, of course, talking about Ulvenwald Captive. He is a defender, but not when he flips. So, he's a 1/2 for 2. I mean, perfect for the mana curve because his deck is really slow, really expensive. He's exactly what it needed. So, you can tap him to add 1 green mana to your mana pool and then pay 7 later in the game and flip him. Now, when he flips, he actually loses Defender and becomes a 4/6. So then he is something that you can definitely hit them in the face with. So it's like, okay, I'm mana ramping. Okay, I don't need to do damage, don't need to swing right now. Boom, flip him over late game, and it's kind of like you drew a completely different creature and summoned it to the battlefield for 7, because now it's huge. You can also still continue to tap him for 2 colorless, which is fantastic. So he can help dump out all 4 of the self-assemblers in a row if you have enough mana, or you can just start putting counters on him and swing with an even bigger than 4/6 creature. The best part is if you were dropping counters on Ulvenwald Captive to make him, like, we'll say a 5/6 so that they just can't swing against you, do that early game, flip him, he keeps the counters. So he really is the perfect creature to put in there as far as, like, ramping. This is a really slow deck because, you know, Retreat does cost 3, and you're not going to do much because pretty much everything in the deck costs 3 except for the 1-cost land fetch, which is nice because then you could just kind of do that. So to speed up the deck and make sure that it works, I threw in Self-Assembler. This card is hilarious. So it's a 4/4 for 5 colorless, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search for basically another copy of itself. You put that into your hand, and chances are you have more than 10 total mana available, so you drop in another one and repeat it. So if you got 1 out, you're going to get all 4 out very shortly. Now, the landfall triggers are a little weak, the land fetch is a little weak, so we threw in a classic, which is now like $2 a card, Oblivion Sower. It's a 5/8 for 6. They could have ended it there and I'd still put it in the deck, but he's really in there because when you cast him, whether they counter him or not, and that is important, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of his or her library, then you put any number of land cards, not even basic land cards, any land cards, including man lands, that player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. That is insane. I mean, he tends to steal bare minimum 1. If he whiffs, you just got rid of 4 of their important spells. I mean, there's just no downside to this card. It's absolutely insane. And 8 toughness can block basically anything. Oh, and don't forget 4 swings and they're dead, and if they chump block, they're going to have to chump block with their entire row just to kill this one guy. And that's if you didn't put counters on him with Retreat. If they countered him, you honestly don't even need him on the field. You're going to get out an army of self-assemblers or something even worse. It just doesn't matter. And then, of course, there's the near-perfect card, one of the best creatures ever printed in the history of Magic, Endless One. No matter when you draw him, you can cast him for the perfect size. Honestly, a 3/3 for 3 is pretty good, and a 10/10 for 10 is just as good. Last game I played an X-Mage, I got him out for 19. I also stole, I think, 11 of the other players' islands. Endless One is hilarious. You could cast him on turn 2 with 2 mana and just shut down their attack swings because he'll block and kill anything. And then if he's not big enough, retreat to Kazandu, start dropping counters on him. I wish Hangerback Walker was still legal, but Endless One is honestly just a little tiny bit better. It's quicker damage, it's more effective, you just gotta cross your fingers and hope that they don't remove it, and if they do remove it, trust me, something worse is coming. They made a mistake if they removed him. Next up, we've got World Breaker. Oh yes, this card used to be expensive, now it's not. I think it's like $3 or $4, not bad at all. Feel free to put in different giant bombs though if you really want. Like Verdura's Gearhulk would be about as good as World Breaker. He's a 5/7 for 7, so that's not very good, but he's in there because he has reach. This deck gets shredded by flyers, and we're talking like Gisela, the 2/3 aerial, I can't even say it, aerial responder. I mean, maybe ornithopters and stuff, angels. I mean, it's not pretty. The vast majority of the time you gain so much life it doesn't matter because there's no really high damage flying guys, like no double strikers, but it gets annoying. So having reach is important, and when World Breaker, whenever you cast him, you permanently exile target artifact, enchantment, or land. Knocking out one of their lands late game, not a big deal. Enchantment, that might be huge. Artifact, that's almost definitely huge. One additional reason why World Breaker is a fantastic choice is because of his final ability. You pay 2 generic and 1 colorless, which can come off of a stolen land or a Blighted Woodland. You sacrifice a land, which who cares, it's not like you don't have enough, and return him from your graveyard to your hand and then cast him all over again and exile something else. I would almost get him killed on purpose, that's so good. So far we got World Breaker, Oblivion Sower, Endless One, and Self-Assembler for the big bombs that actually do damage. The final slot is kind of up to you. I mean, all the bombs are up to you. I mean, World Breaker is a pretty obvious one. Oblivion Sower is part of how the deck works. Endless One is incredibly important at low mana levels and high. But Self-Assembler and this last slot, put in whatever you want. Like I said, Verdur's Gear Hulk. I mean, I wanted to keep the cost low. Otherwise, it probably should be in here. You could put in the Hexproof Trampler guy for all I care. Plated Crusher, I think that's still legal. I wish Gaia's Revenge was still legal. Oh my god. So the final one, I put Bane of Bala Ged in just because it has like Super Annihilator too. I mean, if you get him out early enough, he's not that big, but every time he swings, they're losing pretty much 2 lands. I mean, if they lose something left on the field, they're going to be in deep trouble. So they usually start sacking their lands, and they'll either scoop immediately or scoop within 1 or 2 turns. If you start dropping counters on him, he just can't be stopped. He's an absolute lightning rod for removal, but, you know, that's how this deck works. I wouldn't even bother putting in an instant that grants hexproof. It's just not worth it. I mean, you could just draw, you know, go get another creature with Oath of Nissa. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to come back from it. Or just gain life until you don't care and then draw another creature, basically. Another good option is Accomplished Automaton. I mean, he's not amazing. He costs 7 and he's a 5/7, but he does have Fabricate 1, which would make him a 6/8. Or if they have spot removal, you could put out a 1/1 servo and then just start dumping counters onto him. You could end up with like a 7/7 servo after 1 or 2 turns and just swing away with that. I mean, it's just distributing your chances. So, wasn't my first choice, but it's an option. You guys know the big colorless and the big green creatures. Throw in whatever you want and just make the deck, you know, yours. There is one slight alternative to this deck, and I tested this and it was freaking hilarious, but it was really, really hard to get the deck going. It did even less in the first 4 turns than this version. So if you want a slightly slower version, take out the Attune with the Aether and put in, oh yes, Verdant Crescendo from the Planeswalker deck. So for 4 mana, which is why I don't like it, because even Explosive Vegetation costs 4. I mean, come on, but whatever. You search your library for a basic land card, put it directly onto the battlefield, bypassing your land for the turn limit. Then you search your library for 1 card, and yes, you do leave in exactly 1 copy of this, Nissa, Nature's Artisan. You then reveal it, put it into your hand, and getting to 6 mana is not a problem in this deck whatsoever, so you'll probably be getting her out the next turn. Now, with all the massive defense, they will not be killing Nissa anytime soon, plus people underestimate this Nissa. I mean, she's so powerful in a slow deck. When she comes onto the battlefield, she has 5 loyalty, and then snap your fingers, boom, she has 8 loyalty. They have to hit her for 8 on their first chance that they get to swing at her. 8 damage is what they have to do to kill her. Now, the fact that her +3 gains you 3 life and your deck already gains life means you're going to go overboard. I mean, they have to start hitting her or you're going to ultimate, or they have to start hitting you because you're at 50 life. It's a no-win scenario. That's fantastic. Plus, use her ability 3 times and you can ultimate, and her ultimate wins the game instantly. You will have giant creatures out, and now they're +5/+5, and way more importantly, trample. Unless they board wipe or fog, they are dead. So the scramble will begin to hit Nissa before she gets to 12, and that means that they're not focusing on your life total, which means that you can continue to drive it up with life gain, and it just works. It's perfect. I just really don't like the land fetch costing 4, even though it goes to get a Nissa. But do keep in mind that Oath of Nissa can fetch Nissa because it says Planeswalkers, so there's 2 ways to go get it. If you already have a Nissa on the battlefield, 4 land to go get another land seems a little excessive when Blighted, their ability costs 4, and then you can go get 2 lands. Both of those are placed directly onto the battlefield. Obviously, Explosive Veg and Nissa's Pilgrimage were far better. Nissa's, I don't know, Revelation or whatever is way too slow, costs like 6 or 7 or something, so that one's out. But yeah, I mean, if you manage to get Nissa on the battlefield, chances are you'll win. I mean, you just doubled the power of your board state. So that's an alternative build, but let's talk about the sideboard. At the moment, I have Highspire Artisan because it's a 0/3 reach. It does cost 3. It does Fabricate 1, so it could be a 1/4. That could stop stuff on the ground and in the air, but it won't be killing it anytime soon. The only problem is, you know, you'd probably have to pull a creature to put something in because you can't get rid of the land fetch spells. So Highspire Artisan would go in the place of Self-Assembler, and at least then you could block air. If you absolutely had to, you could pull Endless One as well. I wouldn't get rid of 8 creatures, but you could pull Endless One instead. In the worst case scenario, you could get rid of Ulvenwald Captive. It's kind of the least important card in the deck, sort of. It's not going to seem that way when it lets you cast a spell early, though, I'll tell you that. Plus, the ramp and aggro, I mean, it's huge. Either way, the rest of mine are Vines of the Recluse, which is hilarious because target creature gets +1/+2 and gains reach until end of turn. Untap it for 1 as an instant. So your big old 10/10 that they're flying right past, just reach up and swat them down, even if you already swung with it. And then worst case scenario, I put in Plummet and Clip Wings. Pretty much, just blow up a creature with flying. The problem is the entire sideboard is anti-flying, and you really can't pull 15 cards from the deck at one time, so I should probably put a different concept in the sideboard. That certainly doesn't mean that I did do that because I'm really lazy. I always tell everybody the same thing about the sideboard. Put in your sideboard whatever counters the meta in your area. If people have a whole bunch of blah, then put in what you need to counter blah. In general, this deck is weak as hell against flyers, so I just fixed the flying problem, and that's my sideboard. If you want artifact destruction because everybody's playing artifact, yeah, go for it. If you want enchantment destruction, that's kind of Green's thing. Go for it. If you want to put in like a small, tiny little green Death Toucher, there's a couple of those. That would definitely stop werewolves if somebody's still playing that. In fact, I might pull Clip Wings and put that in instead. Jeez. So that's the deck. I mean, basically the deck is the Landfall, Stall, Life Gain, Counter, Drop, Oblivion, Sower, Blighted, Evolving Wilds, obviously, for the double trigger. You can put in whatever you want for the Fat Pack part of the Fat Pack deck. If it's green, if it's colorless, if it's big, go for it. You want to win the game with X spells, go for it. There's probably some, who knows. It's just an outrageously fun platform to build a deck on, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll try to upload some gameplay footage shortly, but every single game I play against a human tends to go to like turn 40 because this deck is like so slow, and then control slows it down even more, but it does win eventually. Keep that in mind though with 50-minute rounds at Friday Night Magic. So if you like this deck, leave a like. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more awesome decks in the future. I've got a couple coming down the pipe, of course, and I will see you guys next video.